Sarah Dillingham, and I've got with me meteorologist Giammanco, and we're here with IBHS's Ask Me Anything Thunderstorm Ready version. Ian, thanks for joining us today. We've got a lot of good questions I think we might get to.
Yeah, this is going to be fun. So we're going to dive into some of those tips and questions from some of your favorite broadcast meteorologists out there, and all of you out there in Facebook land. Come join us and ask us some of your Thunderstorm Ready questions. What can you do around your home, your business, to help keep your family safe as we head into the spring thunderstorm season?
Yeah, and for those Facebook users that you're on right now, share this, do a watch party, right? And then get your friends to ask some questions as well, because that's what we're here to do. So severe thunderstorm preparedness, we've got the answers, hopefully, right? Hopefully we got all the answers.
Yeah, we're going to try to answer them as best we can. Keep them coming. We'll stay on as long as we've got questions coming in and things we can help provide you to make your home more thunderstorm ready. So we're going to get started. You know, we talk thunderstorm ready here. So Sarah, I'm going to kick us off with our first question. Is what is a thunderstorm, and what makes one severe? That's our first question here today.
Yeah, so thunderstorms, okay, well, by definition, a thunderstorm has thunder, right? Well, how do we get thunder? Well, we have lightning. Okay, so it's going to be a precipitating cloud that has lightning occur within it, and then you get that thunder, and then bada bing, bada boom, you got a thunderstorm.
Just like thunder snow, since we're still in the winter,
yeah,
too,
exactly,
right?
which is still a thunderstorm, right? It's just a different kind of precipitation, different temperature profile, but still thunderstorm, and yes, the lightning still is dangerous in any form, so remember that. But what makes this thunderstorm severe? So there's actually a couple criteria that the National Weather Service designates for a severe thunderstorm warning to meet that severe criteria. That is winds of 60 miles per hour or greater, hail greater than 1 inch, and what was that third one? Oh, let's see.
Tornado.
Yeah, and or can produce a tornado. So that's the thing, and I've actually given this message to a lot of people when they say, oh, it was just a severe thunderstorm warning and we had a weak tornado come through. Well, that's one of the criteria from severe thunderstorm warnings. So that's the thing when we say you want to take severe thunderstorm warnings seriously, because it's not out of the question that you can get a tornado in one. And one word of caution too, for severe thunderstorms, lightning is in a category.
That's right. A lot of people don't realize that lightning, just because a thunderstorm has lightning, doesn't mean you're going to see a severe thunderstorm warning. So all thunderstorms have lightning, as Sarah just mentioned. Yes. And that's one of the hazards, especially if you're outside, sporting event, soccer game with the little ones, to be aware. If you hear thunder, head on inside. That means there's lightning with the storm. The Weather Service has the catchy when the thunder roars, go indoors. Yeah. We're going to foster that. So if you hear those, if you're outside, and don't expect every thunderstorm that has lightning to have a severe thunderstorm warning. It may not.
Yeah, and I mean, you can have these really severe electrical storms that are not severe thunderstorms. So that's why we say lightning is dangerous no matter what kind of storm is happening. And so to take those precautions. All right, so Ian, I'm going to ask you a question now. So I've got a question from Brian Hastings. What are the differences between the potential impacts of a severe thunderstorm warning and a tornado warning when most tornadoes are EF 0 to 1?
Yeah, so we've been on this subject. It's a good one from Brian. So the severe thunderstorms often don't have the high probability for tornadoes, as we just mentioned, but they can happen. And sometimes you'll actually see in the warning text, the storm is rotating, there is the potential for a short-lived tornado or something like that. But severe thunderstorm warnings often focuses on straight line winds and big hail. So you're going to have damaging winds and or hail that's going with it. And sometimes, in some circumstances, you'll see the Weather Service even issue a tornado warning for a very specific location associated with that particular thunderstorm, where we know the rotating part of it is. Yeah. And kind of like the picture behind us, you can see that thunderstorm rotating. It's pretty easy to see. And you might have a severe thunderstorm that accompanies part of the storm that's got the big hail that's coming with it. So that's one of the differences there. Tornado warnings are meant to capture when we know a storm is rotating and we either, one, see debris or have a report that there is an actual ongoing tornado, or the Doppler weather radar is indicating strong rotation such that a tornado is either occurring or is likely to develop soon. So that's the difference between the two. But as Brian mentioned in his question, sometimes those thunderstorm winds can even produce damage that is EF1 or even higher in the case of, say, the derecho that happened in 2020. We're looking at damage that was even, if you put it on the EF scale, EF2, 3 type of damage. So please, our message is take those warnings seriously, because you never know when those straight line winds events that can be very small, they can produce damage just like a low-end tornado for sure.
Yeah, and the National Weather Service will actually issue, sometimes we have these potentially dangerous situations for tornado warnings And we have them for severe thunderstorm warnings as well. Like the derecho in Iowa last summer that you might remember that went through central Iowa, caused a lot of damage, and some of that was equivalent to an EF3 tornado, and those were just straight line winds. So severe thunderstorms can definitely pack a punch, even if it's just straight line winds, and it doesn't take a tornado to knock a tree down and cause some big problems, right? And that's another danger to the storms as well.
So we got a question from our Facebook user, Thomas Arlo out there sends this one in. What about global warming? So how does climate change influence the weather we're seeing day to day?
Yeah, so climate change, you know, I've spent the last 8 to 10 years roughly in the broadcast industry, and so I've seen a lot of different types of weather events happen across different parts of the country. And what we're really seeing is that added heat that we have to this system, to the atmosphere, that's causing some issues on the heavy rain side. It's causing issues with drought because what you're doing, so basically for a given temperature, the warmer the temperature is, the more water vapor you can contain in the atmosphere, okay? So we'll start with that first, and that is going to speak to the rain threat. So we could see when we have a warmer system to start, a warmer planet overall, the atmosphere can hold more moisture. What that lends itself to is high rainfall rates. That means that you're getting a lot of rainfall in a short period of time, and what that's going to do is cause flash flooding. So you can see greater instances of flash flooding in a warmer world because you're going to have these very effective precipitation rates, dropping a lot of rain in a short period of time over either some small or large areas. Counteract that on the other side in regards to drought. If you've got warmer temperatures, right, that potential for moisture is even higher. So that means it's just going to evaporate more water. It evaporates the water out of the soil. When it's not precipitating, the water comes out of the soil, so you're getting greater evaporation rates. So you're seeing warmer temperatures, even drier conditions because more water can be evaporated from that groundwater. So you're seeing those extremes on both ends, warmer and drier in places where you have deserts and droughts, and then you're having areas where you're having more flooding because you're having persistent rain that's heavier and coming down in a short period of time. And then we're also seeing that reflected in possibly where we're seeing tornadoes. And we've talked about this with climate. We don't know necessarily whether or not we're going to see stronger tornadoes because of climate change, but we might be seeing them in areas that previously didn't see them as often.
Yeah, the geographic trends are something we're keeping a very close eye on, and we're very good at looking ahead to what the potential future environments may look like. And we're just getting to the point where we can take that information, put it into our conventional weather forecast models, we call it downscaling, and go simulate what may happen with a thunderstorm. But that's the limit of what we can do right now. So we're trying to figure out, you know, what's going on. We just simply, like I'm a former baseball player. You think about the steroid era in Major League Baseball. We just juice in the atmosphere just a little bit more. And like a homer from somebody, we don't know if that home run would or would have not gone out of the ballpark, but it does raise the odds just a little bit. So you're putting that on top of things. And severe weather, too, is impacting us just because our communities are getting bigger. We're more spread out, right? And so our targets have gotten bigger as well.
Exactly.
So that all these elements, the climate, it's a great question. All the climate elements are lumped on top of that. And that's why we just, you know, for all of us, you and I out there, and Sarah and I here talking, it just takes one event, right, to make it that really bad day. All these factors that we're talking about aside.
Right, yeah, and so with climate, it is difficult to go, and just necessarily say that one storm was caused by climate change, right? That climate attribution science is still developing, but there are factors that we've already seen change because of that, and we're already seeing some of the impacts. So that's why it's just such a huge area of study right now. Okay, Ian, looks like I've got one question for you here. So this question comes from Weather Channel meteorologist Rick Knabb, Dr. Rick Knabb, formerly of the National Hurricane Center. How important are safe rooms, and are they necessarily and or affordable?
Yeah, that's a great question. Thanks, Rick.
Sorry, are they necessary?
Yeah, thanks, Rick, for sending that in. The in-home safe room has saved more lives than we can even imagine since its really inception back in the 1970s and 80s. And it's become so common in a place like Oklahoma, where I had a friend of mine who was moving to Tulsa, and one of the first questions he would ask his realtor was, does this house have a storm safe room or shelter? We don't quite see as much in that uptake in the Southeast, where we're actually seeing some of these big outbreaks of late happen. But they're very, very affordable, especially on a new build where you're just building it into a closet, a bathroom, things like that. But now some of the retrofit kits, like putting them into the concrete in your garage, they're coming down in price. Plus there's grant programs all over the place to help folks actually make that big purchase and they have saved more lives than we can sit here and count today in tornadoes. That's one reason why our fatalities continue to go down. We just want to see more folks use them. And as we saw back in the tornado outbreak in last December, even just having that place of shelter is such a big deal. We talk about if you don't have a safe room or a basement, interior room, closet, anywhere, as many walls as you can between the outside. But safe rooms have been proven time and time again. And now, if we look at the building code aspect, some of the critical facilities now, this will be in building codes for places like hospitals, schools. This is a tremendous advancement for having that safe place to go. It's these built-in safe room structures that are, one, time-tested now, and there's the financing available to help folks put those in. And we're starting to see that movement on the codes world, and that's a really, really cool thing. We're very happy about that here at IBHS.
Yeah, and that's great. And that's one of our main efforts here at IBHS is to get the research that we're doing in the chamber to make it out there to people's homes and businesses, and so that we can shore those up so that when other perils come down the road, tornadoes and damaging winds and that kind of thing, we're building stronger, and codes are how we do that and how we make that long-term change for things that are going to stick and spread throughout communities going forward.
Absolutely. So let's keep the ball rolling. We've got another one coming in. This one is to Sarah here.
Ooh, okay.
What is the best place to find information about a severe storm or severe weather?
Yeah, so, in today's social media age, there's a lot of information out there, right? There's a lot of different sources that you can get that information from. So I would say start with your National Weather Service office, because they're the ones that are actually in there watching the storms scan by scan on the radar, and they're going to be putting out the warnings. They're going to give you the warning text. As soon as they see a thunderstorm out there that has met that severe thunderstorm criteria, one of the 3 criteria that we spoke about earlier, or tornado warning, they're going to be the first ones to get that information. So your local broadcasters are taking the lead from them as well. So they're a good place to start for sure. Also, your local meteorologist is a great source as well, too, because they're still there watching the radar there, and we're all there. As a former broadcast vet myself, we're there keeping you safe, trying to keep our eye and bringing you the warning and letting you know what you need to know. And it's not just what are we saying about the storm, it's like how it's going to impact us. We've really seen that focus change in the last several years, particularly probably since the 2011 super outbreak, where it wasn't just the forecast itself, but the information and how that's going to impact you. So we're also going to communicate those impacts as well, and that's something the National Weather Service warnings can do, something your local meteorologist is going to do as well. And social media, while there are a lot of sources, make sure whatever source you use, it is trusted and it is vetted by you or other people that you know who are in the field and know their stuff.
So that's a good point, Sarah. And even on the platform we're on today, Facebook,
yes.
Sometimes the algorithms don't show you the newest piece of information. So one, have multiple ways to get that information, but be mindful of that. It's something I've started doing when I put weather information out there for my family and friends. I'll put a timestamp on it, just when it happened, because you might not see it. So Facebook, not a great place for warning information. It's a good place to see, hey, a heads up, especially if you follow your local office of the National Weather Service, the Storm Prediction Center. You can see what may be coming days down the road. But for warnings, Twitter's a good platform. But to be honest, make sure you got your notifications turned on your cell phone and
which are geolocated.
A trusty NOAA weather radio.
Yes, I got my parents one of those for Christmas one year, and so it does their weekly test, and they might not like that test, but when severe weather is on, they flip that switch and they're like, my NOAA weather radio is on, so I know they're protected, and that's going to wake you up in the middle of the night, at home if you're doing something, and like Ian said, with your smartphones, that's going to follow you around with your GPS. So if you're traveling in a location that you don't have a hard set locator for, that some warning app might not let you know, get something that's going to follow you. So if you're traveling and you're in a new county that you don't live in, you're still going to be able to get those warnings.
So that takes us, I'm going to ask you the question, what about outdoor sirens? You hear people talk about that.
So I know there are a lot of mixed feelings about sirens. What they were originally created for was to notify people who were outdoors, people like farmers or people out playing sports or activities where they weren't near sources to get those pieces of information. There's some people that say, oh, well, I didn't hear the sirens, but they say that about being in their home, and that's just because I think over the years, that was one of the warning systems that we mostly use, but that's not really what they were designed for. So that's why you want to have those multiple ways of warnings, because the sirens aren't meant for you to be able to hear inside your home necessarily, unless you happen to be close enough to it, or have your window open or something. But I do think they still have benefits. There are some that, question if we should even have them at all, but I do still think they serve a purpose. It's just to make sure that we communicate to people what is that purpose and how they should and should not be used.
Yeah, so our weather warning process is a system, right? That's a great way to look at it. And why we tell folks to have multiple ways to get those warnings, but we view that chain of information as a system. So no one thing is perfect. And so for sirens, please don't rely solely on them, just like you wouldn't solely rely on some other source of information.
Right.
Always have those 3 ways to get warnings. And that's a great tip for folks out there as we head into the heart of severe weather season, which brings us into kind of another really good question about the severe weather seasonality aspect.
Yeah, so you and I are going to talk about this one, and is there a specific thunderstorm or tornado season, and if so, why did we see some in December? Right, because so we talked about this here at IBHS. We looked at this data closely. You remember the Mayfield tornado, the other tornadoes that occurred that day? We had several fatalities with those. We saw a lot of damage, and it was December, right, early mid-December, and that's when people are thinking about getting holiday gifts and presents and that kind of thing. They're not thinking about severe weather bearing down on them. But depending on what part of the country you live in, we're here in the southeast here in South Carolina. I'm from Georgia, you're from Louisiana. So this part of the country is not unaccustomed to seeing severe weather at multiple times of the year, whether it be in winter, spring, summer, whenever. So there is somewhat a severe thunderstorm season depending on where you are in the country, but then there's also areas like here where we just kind of have to be on alert all year round.
Yeah, there's there's definitely truth to that. And yes, our peak season is typically in the spring months, but we see across the country, especially east of the Rockies, this secondary peak in the number of severe weather reports that happens in the fall. But if you throw in El Nino, La Nina, there you start to see some of these regional differences break down a little bit, where we're in a La Nina pattern right now, and we would expect a more active severe year in the southeast. And sure enough, we saw that kind of manifest itself in the December outbreak, whereas folks in the deep south, those are years that you do see an uptick in what we call the cool season, fall into really December before you get to the heart of winter that can bring you severe weather. Now flip that around, and like an El Nino year often brings like high numbers of tornadoes into the Florida Peninsula.
Yes,
so there's all these little kind of like subtleties that do happen. But if you take all of our information as a whole over a long record, we do see the spring is where we see the most number of severe weather reports, but it changes geographically, and we have that secondary peak in the fall. We call it the second season.
And just to point out too, while a vast majority of the tornadoes occur east of the Rockies, we can also have tornadoes in California. We've seen them in Oregon. We've seen them at high elevations in Washington State. So almost every state, I believe, in the union, except probably Alaska, has seen a tornado before. So it's not impossible that you see them, even if you typically have a season where they occur. That doesn't mean that you're just
I even think there's one in
free.
Alaska. I remember a couple of years ago, there was a picture of a funnel cloud in the mountains of Alaska. And don't even think just because you live in the mountains or the myths about big cities and those kinds of things. Throw that out the window.
Yeah, you do get severe thunderstorms in Alaska. It's kind of one of those novelties where the meteorologists are like, oh, they look at their radar app and it's like, Alaska, okay, and then you go and look at it and just see what it's got to offer. So they do happen, even if they're not a lot of them.
Yeah, that kind of took us into our next question, was about the geographical aspect of tornadoes. And I think we covered it a little bit, looking at, if I don't live in the area east of the Rockies, yes, they do occur. We've even seen some, I know this year and last year in California with some severe thunderstorms that developed out there. So it can happen. So all these tips we're talking about, even if you live outside of the areas that see the most number of these, they're still handy. They're part of your toolkit, right? They're in your back pocket, knowing that if something weird did happen, that I know the tips to take action, even though, say, my neighbors or folks around me may not be as well versed as some of us here in the southeast that deal with severe weather all the time.
Right.
Those folks in the Great Plains. Think about the residents of Dallas, Oklahoma City. I know the folks in Dallas. My sister lives out there. Shout out to Gina. She had to deal with some hail in the Dallas area again.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, that big squalling came through. Yeah.
It is that time of year. That's why we are here with you talking about severe weather.
Yeah, and like we said earlier too, we're starting to see some issues with climate and see that climate change and see that region vary a little bit, and that's why we say, like in all these states, you just kind of want to have that plan and have these safety tips kind of at the forefront of your mind, and maybe pick a time. Now is when we're seeing some of our severe weather preparedness weeks being publicized by our National Weather Service offices. So take this time to get ready for severe thunderstorm season, even if you don't typically see a lot of them, but just have that plan and just go over it with your family just to make sure that you're covered if you do. So.
And even all of you who may live on the coastal areas that deal with hurricanes, all the tips we're talking about give you a head start on hurricane season.
Exactly. So, okay, so we're also going to tag team this one, I think. Is there anything that we can do to keep our houses from being destroyed in a tornado? And I think that there are, because we've tested some here in the lab. And Ian, I know there's one particular one that you're passionate about, and one of those is garage doors.
Yes, so we're going to start with a couple things. There's not just one element, but we're going to start with some of the big ones. And garage doors is one of the biggest weak point on a home that has an attached garage. And what happens is the garage doors are a weak spot. Wind is really, really good at finding those weak spots in our homes and exploiting it. And we want to do everything we can to keep all that air, all that wind out of our homes. So even that old myth, the old school myth about open your windows, and no, do not do that. Keep the wind out of your house as best as you possibly can. So garage doors can fail. They're a weak point, and it lets all that air rush into our homes, and it starts pushing up and outward on our walls and our roofs. So it's very common if the garage door fails, chances are you are going to see structural damage to your house, whether it's the roof above it or even the wall. We simulated that in our big wind tunnel that's about 50 feet that way. We actually saw the wall break apart and come off of this home after the garage door had failed. So a wind-rated garage door. There should be a sticker on the back of your garage that has some pressure numbers on it. Unfortunately, most of ours don't. That is what we want to see folks do better, and this happens to be part of building code. So if you're in the market for a new garage door, make sure you get a wind-rated one. It needs to have a sticker on the back that means it's tested and rated for the wind environment in your area.
Yes, and I actually just moved into a new townhome, and I'm thinking, knowing this about garage doors and what I've learned in the last couple of years, I go and walk over, and sure enough, I've got a sticker on there with rated. It's got the numbers on it and everything. So I was like, I have a wind-rated garage door, and I felt very excited. I was like, I am prepared.
So Sarah is one of the rare ones. We do not on my house,
Really?
And I can actually see some of the gaps around it. So that is the one thing that we would do, is to replace that garage door, make sure we get a wind-rated one that's got the proper sticker on it. And unfortunately, a lot of folks don't across the country.
Yeah, and a lot of people don't even know what to look for if they did have one. Another thing that you kind of alluded to with the garage doors, when the wind gets into your home, having your door shut. And this is something that, let's say it's on the day of severe weather, that tornadoes are possible or high winds are possible, where you could see the potential for wind to get into your home in some way or another. Take that time to maybe just go through and just close your interior doors to try, let's say you did have something like a garage door failure or front door failure or something. You want to try to confine that wind to the smallest space possible. So go through and shut your interior doors on that day. This is probably not something, and say if you're rushing to a shelter, whether or not you should take time to go shut your living room door, I don't know. I think I just want you to be safe, but that's just something to keep in your mind for like the morning of, for severe weather. If it's planned in your area, just go ahead and do that.
That was straight from a piece of work right here at IBHS in our big wind tunnel, and we happened to notice it. We were looking at how a home across all of its connections responds to extreme winds, where the loads are put on the roof-to-wall connections and the wall-to-foundations, and we noticed if you shut the interior doors, you can actually compartmentalize some of the wind pressures should the building envelope, so that's air getting into your home. So a garage door fail, a window fail, a door fail can help just reduce that the force pushing up on your roof, which is acting in the same way the wind is. The wind's trying to pull it off, and now you have all this air coming in that's pushing up in the same direction. It can help reduce that just enough. Is it completely fail-safe? No, but it is something we know that can give your home a fighting chance. So that's one thing. If you're headed to work on a day that's got a risk of severe weather, just walk around, shut your interior doors before you leave the house. And it's a great tip, straight from work that we've done here at IBHS. So we've covered two of those now.
Yeah, and so in kind of one of the things that you hit on was the load path, right? Continuous load path. And that's something that's new to a lot of people. They're thinking, well, what is that? And that's more like engineering, right? You're basically helping to distribute the weight and the pressure to different catch points, if you will, in your home, and having those proper connections in the proper spots really does make a difference. And that's something that we use on our fortified standard, right? So we have fortified roof, fortified gold and silver, or silver and gold, I should say. And let's talk about that really quick, because that was something that some of that research was developed here at IBHS that helped lead to that.
The fortified standards are based on decades of great wind engineering research that's been done essentially following some of the most prolific hurricanes we've dealt with. I think all the way back to Hurricane Andrew in 1992. Well, these things we know will also work in the tornado extreme wind environments that we're dealing with severe thunderstorms.
Yeah.
And we talk about, Sarah mentioned load path, and our fortified gold standard, she hit the nail on the head. It's the rugged connections that help distribute all the forces that are acting on that building, whether it's actually a home or a commercial structure. That's how we can start to keep the building intact. And to be very honest, this is a great way if you're building a new home.
Yes.
To integrate all the latest engineering and science. So we do encourage folks, please check out fortifiedhome.org. Another piece of that is the roof. Sarah mentioned it. When you are re-roofing, it is the best time for the retrofit option. So there's a couple things that come with that can help out here. You one, get a sealed roof deck, which helps keep water from getting in your home should your shingles fail. And we see that time and time again, and even winds of just 50, 60 miles an hour.
Yeah.
We all know water gets in your house. Whatever the method is not a good thing.
Yeah.
And then we also add ring shank nails, which these nails help resist uplift by a factor of 2 or so, if not more, higher than a conventional nail, and the nailing pattern itself. So this can keep your roof decking. That's the plywood decking. So we'll give you an example. Should your garage door fail, you stand a better chance of not having that roof decking come off above it.
Right.
Things like that. So that's another element. And then there's some details on the edges of your roof where the shingles lay down that can help keep those shingles on. That's a vulnerable spot right there at the edges and corners of your roof. So
yeah, we do have that extra protection there on the edges. Yeah.
Lots of great stuff there. So fortifiedhome.org, please go check that out. There's some great stuff, but in terms of tornado and preventing a kind of complete destruction of a home, it's about load path, no matter what the structure is.
Yeah, you want to give yourself the best chance, because it is difficult to create something that is tornado proof, completely wind proof, but it's resilient. It's making it as strong as it can possibly be. That's what you want to do. That's the best option.
I'm gonna give you all out there a stat. We looked at both the Moore, Oklahoma and Joplin, Missouri tornadoes and looked at all of the damage indicators rated by the National Weather Service. And for both events, over 50% of those noted damage indicators are addressed by some element of the Fortified Home program. So we all, we have a natural habit to think of tornadoes as like this mile-wide bulldozer. But in reality, they're not. Those peak EF5 winds only occur in a really small spot at a really tiny point in time. So there's a lot we can actually do. We call it narrow the path, trying to shrink down that swath of damage through building better. But I want folks to understand there is something we can do about tornado damage. And those two events, those are extreme tornado cases. And over half of those damage indicators are addressed by some element of science and engineering that we know what to do.
Absolutely, yeah, and like you said, it's how everything comes together that gives your home the best chance. So we did have a question in the chat here. This is from Kurt Hahn. Can you explain straight line winds and macro bursts?
All right, so we're going to get into what we call in the meteorological world thunderstorm outflow winds. These are essentially exhaust kind of blobs of air that come out from these severe thunderstorms.
And they're straight line winds, right? Like we talk about tornadoes, which are rotational, and there's an uplift component, so there's other things going on, but straight line winds cause a lot of damage, and these guys can do it. Absolutely.
So the derecho is an extreme form of this when you combine a bunch of thunderstorm cells that are all producing essentially microbursts, macrobursts. That's a sense of scale that we would be able to see that kind of extreme damage across this long swath. So essentially this is downward moving air from the thunderstorm that's accelerating as it's moving downward. And sometimes it's accompanied by heavy rain, sometimes not. If you're out in the Great Plains and it's very dry down low by the surface, you may not see any precipitation. But this downward moving air, it's typically cold, not always, but it's negatively buoyant, so it wants to go down, and it's going down very, very fast, and it's accelerating. Well, what's going to happen when it hits the ground, right? It has nowhere to go.
Can't go down, so it's got to go out.
It's got to go out, and that's what happens. It spreads out at the ground and then just continues propagating along. It does kind of adjust to the underlying friction of the earth and does slow down with time, but I mean, these currents of, you think of it, it's just kind of a current of air.
Yeah.
I mean, they can go on for 100 plus miles.
Yeah.
You can see outflow travel. And sometimes right at the point where, even in this picture, you can kind of see where the hail shaft is over here. You might expect that over there.
That's where that downdraft is, right? Of that
Exactly.
thunderstorm.
And you would expect right at that point the air reaches the ground and stagnate. You might have the most intense winds, most intense damage. And if you think about a derecho, this is a combination of multiple cells all doing this at the same time. And so all that air reaching the surface, that cold blob or cold pool of air, just congeals and then spreads out.
Yep.
And it keeps on going.
Yeah,
and that's what we deal with.
And we can see some really strong wind gusts from these. I mean, we've seen some of these 80 to 100 miles per hour where the National Weather Service surveyors will actually have to go out and see if it was actually a tornado. But sometimes we might have these embedded microbursts that occur with thunderstorms where we have tornadoes in other cells. But in these, we actually can produce 90 to 100 mile per hour winds that are considered downbursts and microbursts, these straight line winds.
Absolutely. And you can see it over a small area, so you might think it's a tornado. So one of the things we look for in damage is, say trees are down, is it all pointing one direction?
Yeah.
And that's a good indicator that it was a microburst, one of these larger outflow features, and not a tornado. But like we talked about at the top of the broadcast, the damage can be just the same.
Just as bad, yeah.
So take those warnings seriously, no matter if it's a severe thunderstorm or a tornado warning.
Yeah, we don't want you to be surprised just because you didn't have a tornado warning that you didn't see damage with a severe thunderstorm warning, because again, you can have it with both of them. So it looks like, okay, so we got another question from our chat. This one comes from Melanie Scher. What are the differences between how to prepare for a hurricane versus how to prepare for a thunderstorm? So I'll start with the thunderstorm because we've kind of already gone over a few of those, but we'll recap some of those. So with thunderstorms, well, thunderstorms and hurricanes, right? They both bring wind. That is the peril that both of these. Now, hurricanes have the wind-driven rain aspect, which I'll let you, as a hurricane expert, get into that. But so with thunderstorms, you're still trying to protect against winds. So taking that time to trim your trees around there, stop branches from falling on your roof, causing issues there, which is obviously going to create a lot of damage, water intrusion, damage to your home as well. But also, like, your garage door is going to matter here too, because you get those tornadic winds, those strong damaging straight line winds, those matter as well. Let's see, hail as well. Hail can cause a lot of damage. I mean, we've seen, what is the stat? I believe it's like over the last 10 or 11 years, we've had several billion-dollar hail events each year just from hail. Just from hail, okay? So, and that's included, like, some of these have been in the Dallas Metroplex where, Ian was talking about his sister just dealt with hail. I mean, they're no stranger to seeing these very large hailstorms. So you can actually, in these hail-prone regions, you can install these HVAC screens that will go around your HVAC unit to protect it from hail impacts. You can also shore up your gutters and downspouts, because a lot of those are made with aluminum and vinyl materials that are a little bit weaker. So if they get impacted by, especially one of those larger hailstones, it could cause dents and cracks and cause some damage that way. So you can upgrade those to steel, so they better withstand that impact. And then also, we talked about fortified, and that the shingles on top of your roof, they can see a lot of damage. And we've done some great research here at IBHS rating shingles and how well they perform in hailstorms. And so we actually have a rating system. So if you have to have a new roof, let's say you got damaged by a hailstone, we're going to recommend that you put it into that fortified standard. And that's going to include having an impact rated shingle on top of that roof. That's going to give you that best protection from granule loss, from cracking of the shingles, and also shingle loss, right? Which then exposes the roof deck and then allows wind and water to have access to your roof. And if it's not sealed properly, then that water can get into your home, and that's a whole nother slew of problems. So, but that's for thunderstorms. But Ian, like I said, there's a lot of corollaries to hurricanes.
Yeah, so on the wind aspects of the preparedness tips are about the same. On the hail wind, yeah, look for a good or excellent rated shingle according to the IBHS impact testing scorecard. You can find it out there on the web, easily searchable. If you just type in IBHS hail ratings, you will find them. Yep. So that, hail is the big difference on the thunderstorm environment. Hurricanes have their own kind of flavor of things. The wind tips that we talk about with thunderstorms really apply across the board for all windstorms. Yep. Tornadoes, severe straight line winds, hurricanes. Hurricanes bring storm surge, and it's the things we evacuate for. That's what our evacuations are actually driven by, is the biggest threat to our life safety in a hurricane is water, and it's storm surge. So essentially all that mass of water that the hurricane's pushing comes ashore, and that's why we want to get out of the way of it. Water is much more massive in terms of weight than air, and it can cause some really, really nasty damage. Second to that is hurricanes we can see coming. Now we can forecast outbreaks of severe weather well in advance.
Right, but it's hard to see like that one thunderstorm headed towards your coastline, right? But with these tropical systems, we often have days lead time, and you kind of know the range of the coast where it could cause impacts.
And I'll give you the example. As someone growing up in South Louisiana, we all knew hurricane coming, get your supplies, your non-perishable food stuff, stock up on your water, fill your bathtub up with water, and board up your windows. Why do we board up our windows? It's to keep debris from puncturing our house and letting that air in, like we just talked about, and causing damage, wind-driven rain, and the structural elements we talked about. Unfortunately, with severe thunderstorms and tornadoes, they're small, right? Think about even some of the tiny, short-lived tornadoes. We had one that impacted our area here, North Central High in Kershaw, South Carolina. This tornado was only on the ground for like 2 minutes. It did produce significant, EF2-3 damage, and it was only maybe 50 yards wide.
Yeah. Very small.
It's really small, so we don't have the time to go put up storm shutters and take those big preparedness tips. None of us want to live in a dark home for days because severe weather is coming. Now, if you think about where technology is heading, you could start to think of smart home technologies taking us that way, where we have warning-activated protection systems on our homes. I don't think we're there yet, but I think the next 10, 20, 30 years, that becomes an option. But right now, this phenomena, I can't tell you, like Sarah and I can't tell y'all out there that we're going to have a tornado here at the IBHS Research Center next Wednesday at 3 o'clock.
Yeah.
We're not there yet.
Yeah. If the science was there, we could really make some big changes now.
But on the hurricane side, right, 4 or 5 days out, we're getting to the point where we can say you're going to experience hurricane conditions that far in advance with a good and high degree of confidence.
Yes, the National Hurricane Center has made leaps and bounds in track forecasting in the last 10 to 20 years. I mean, intensity is still one of those things we've certainly improved upon, but when you're limited in observations, right, those open ocean observations, until we can really get those, I mean, that's what shores up our models. That's how we get better at forecasting weather. It's having that data availability and the ability to model that forward in time. So if it's bad data in, you're going to get bad data out. As we learned in school, garbage in, garbage out, right? If you don't have good data going in, you're not going to get a good result there. So like you said, with track, we can kind of at least give you a range of where we do expect you to have some impacts from a particular storm. And with severe, it is much more difficult too, because it's just that pinpoint. But that's why we always preach preparedness regardless, just to make sure that you're in a good spot.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's flip our way back to hail now. We got a question coming in. As home and business owners, what's our level of concern around hail, and where do we start those protective actions?
Yeah, so I kind of recapped some of those a minute ago. We're talking about like billions of dollars each year in hail damage and loss and claims from the insurance industry. So hail is one of those things that kind of goes under recognized really, because we have hurricanes, wind that causes more visible damage that we can see, as well as tornadoes obviously can cause very visible damage. But until we have like these major hailstorms where we see skylights shattered and cars damaged, which I mean, after working in broadcast, I've definitely seen that countless times where you have these massive hailstorms and there's just broken windows and dented buildings and cars everywhere. So, but it's one of those things that people don't often think about unless you live in a particular area. So, installing those HVAC screens, shoring up your gutter system, that kind of thing, those are things that can help you, withstand those hail impacts. And also too, for your cars, I know a lot of people use their garages as like storage rooms, right? And so maybe have a way to clean out that garage, and if hail is forecast in your region, make it so that you can pull the car in, or at least get some protective cover over that car to try to protect yourself from that hail and get it out of the way.
Yeah, so here's a stat that many of you may not realize. The biggest loss driver from severe thunderstorms, the most amount of damage in terms of dollars lost from that damage, is hail.
That's
it's not tornadoes.
Think about that, right?
It's not straight line winds.
That's
in
crazy.
any given year, we estimate about 60 to 80% of all the damage from severe thunderstorms comes from hail. And guess what's your first line of defense?
Yeah, your roof, right?
So if you've had a hail damage and you're getting a new roof on, please check out those IBHS hail impact ratings and get a better performing shingle. There's also other roof material types like metal and some of the new composite materials that do offer good hail protection, especially if you're folks in Oklahoma City and Dallas, where there's essentially a 100% chance every single year you are going to see a severe hailstorm. and have to deal with the damage that comes with it, and you're tired of that nuisance, check those out. Get a better performing product. It's rooted in the science right here at IBHS.
Yeah.
So please take a look at that if you're tired of just dealing with hail damage. But that's a stat not a lot of folks know.
Yeah.
I used to joke it's like the Rodney Dangerfield of natural hazards. It doesn't get any respect.
No respect.
I'm going to date myself. And for those of you young folks out there, you can just Google it.
Yeah.
But hail is a big loss driver. So we're going to finish up here as we kind of wrap up our show. One, thank you for joining us and all the great questions that we've been able to answer here live. Sarah, we're going to talk the one thing, if you were doing one big thing to your house, what should it be?
You know, and I think for me, after I just bought a home and I'm standing there looking at it, I'm reading these inspection reports and all this stuff, and I'm going through and I'm like, well, what's the load path? Like, what's behind those walls? You know, so if I'm building a new home, I want that continuous load path, right? I want those. I want the roof connected to the walls connected to the ground. Like I want that reinforcement, and that's something that's difficult to see. You know, if you're not building a new house, that's one of those things that it's very, very difficult to know about your home. But like if I'm starting from scratch, that's what I know. So yeah, I'm gonna go over that one.
Okay, I'll take the retrofit side, and I'm gonna go with a fortified roof. When you're re-roofing, it's the best time. And a fortified roof, go into that system of protection, those three main things: sealed roof deck, ring shank nails, and edge details. That's the best time and gives your home the best upgrade to a better, stronger roof. We talked a lot about garage doors, and if I had to pick a 1B,
I was going to say, if we're going
to wind-rated garage doors. And that's something, though, on a time scale aspect, you may be able to deal with first.
Yeah.
But when you're ready to re-roof, my parents did this a couple years ago. They actually somehow magically got 30 years out of their roof, which is a rarity these days. And don't expect that in general performance against severe weather. But they decided that was the time. They live in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. They're subjected to the inland wind aspect of hurricanes. They went ahead, had the roofer follow the fortified standards. I've never seen my mom. She's probably watching. Hi, Mom. So proud of their new roof. And I know they took some effort to make sure the roofer knew what they were doing, went through, had done a training program through one of the shingle companies that IBHS offers, and put on their fortified roof. So that's, for me, those are the two retrofits, the big ones, a fortified roof. If you're not ready for the new roof side, then look at your garage door. So that's 1B.
Yeah, like we said, that's one of the big ways and one of the main failures that we see. So it's great to do both of those if you can. So, well, thanks everybody for joining us for this Ask Me Anything with Thunderstorm Ready. So we really enjoyed answering your questions today, and I hope you guys learned a lot. And if you have any other questions, you can find Ian and myself on social media. I think I'm at Sarah Dillingham on Twitter, and you're Giammanco33.
Yep, Giammanco33. Also, everybody out there, check out disastersafety.org/Thunderstorm Ready, or just Google Thunderstorm Ready IBHS. You'll find us, and all the tips, and even a lot more, including some of the cost estimates of these projects. Information on the fortified program. Please check that out. A lot of great information on that.
Yeah. Thanks so much, Ian. And thank you guys for watching. And remember, you can also go back and share this link later to any of your friends and family who you feel like had missed out on some good information today. So thanks so much for joining us, and we'll see you next time.